Forever young, I wanna be forever young. Let me line myself up here. I get the impression that the upright version works better than the wide version because many of you, I think, watch on tablets and phones. So it's Sunday afternoon, a dreary Sunday afternoon in the harbor, the Egg Harbor. Let me see if I can bring up this. I'll bring up. What the fuck is that app I use? Oh, here it is. I can show you this. Let's see if this will allow me to share the screen in a responsible manner. Oh, God. Well, that doesn't exactly show. Oh, what a piece of shit this thing is. Let me turn off the names. Let's just do this. Oh, that's better. I don't know why it's showing my freaking name. Let me see if I can get the name off of there. I'm trying to say, every time I do this, it's like the first time it's been done. There. So you can kind of see, let me switch here. All that stuff's all over the driveway because the rain has knocked it down off the tree. So, what's going on with you folks? Hello, Janaea. Today I mailed you and Sarah's Frankenstein autograph photo. been working a lot on the Genesis experiment novel. Hello, Lisa Ann Alugaili. See how I've worked on the pronunciation? We have had a lot of rain today. And those plants in front of the porch have exploded. They were like this tall 2 weeks ago. And then they just, bam. So what's been going on out there is you're in, let me see what happens if I do this. Let's see what happens if I turn. If I turn that off and maybe turn on a, well, that allows us to see quite a bit. I assume most of you watch on a phone, right? Or a tablet. That's why I started doing these things vertical, because I think it's a better view. I've been to Michigan. It's been many years, but to Battle Creek, Michigan. It's great. Tony the Tiger. Michigan looks a lot like here. Like the trees and the everything look very similar here. The one thing I remember about Michigan, which shocked me, is here the squirrels are gray, but in Michigan they were black, but they looked identical. Just they were all black. Now, if you guys look out front of the garage door, let me push. I don't know if you can see the cursor here, but right down here is a milk jug and it looks blue from the garage. Well, I put Dawn dishwashing detergent in that because my lawnmower was leaking. The air was out of the tire. And I was able to use that to find the leaks. But everything's turning green, folks. Been working on the Genesis experiment. Hello, Crystal. How are you? How's little T? How's little T, you and your sister? Soggy beaver pressure cleaning. That's quite similar. Is that real? I always am one for a good name, but you know, beavers need cleaning too. Never seen you in here before, so welcome. But if you have been in here before, my next door neighbor owns a uh, pressure washing business commercial. I am doing great, Crystal. Thank you. John, how are you? We almost considered going to Bagliani's today, but it was raining so hard that we decided against it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with driving in the rain, except for the fact that I didn't feel like it because it was pretty heavy. How's Patty? And Crystal, you make sure to tell Tracy we miss her. So I'm sorry if this is a repeat for some of you, but I'll read the beginning of. Oh, you're going to Galena again. Awesome. We know what goes on there. What happens in Galena stays in Galena. All right. Here's the foreword to the Genesis experiment. I'll read a little if you don't mind. Christianity existed in Iraq for centuries, its origins dating back to when the region was known as Mesopotamia. Adam and Eve are believed to have been from Iraq, and the Garden of Eden is believed to have been in southern Iraq. Mesopotamia is considered by many scholars to be the birthplace of civilization, which is ironic considering how uncivilized it became in recent years. The rise of Islam caused Christianity in the region to dwindle. Christians fled to avoid persecution, but eventually, under the rule of Saddam Hussein, anti-Christian violence was kept under control. There were estimated to be 1 million Christians living in Iraq at the time of the 1991 Gulf War, dropping to 800,000 during the 2003 Iraq War. A decade later, during the Iraq War with ISIL, Christians faced execution if they did not convert, and many more fled the country. Very true what she told me to tell you. She misses you too, and she's sorry that she hasn't been on. She's been very busy with the gardening and with her grandbaby. Well, that's understandable. ISIL was finally defeated in Iraq in 2017, and Christians were free to practice their religion, but few remained in the country. The Catholic Church seized upon this opportunity to make a bold move. They intended to reintroduce Christianity, specifically Catholicism, into parts of the country where it once thrived. It was not widely publicized, but under the direct supervision of the Vatican, small chapels were opened throughout the country. St. Narcisse was one of those chapels. Chapter 1. Al-Qurna was a small town located in southern Iraq, near where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers crossed. I think that's Tigris. And Euphrates rivers crossed. On the outskirts of town was a small, albeit busy, marketplace where vendors of all sorts sold their goods. At the very end of the marketplace was St. Narcisse, a Catholic chapel in a small, mud built structure. Thank you. Somebody made a donation. I'll tell you who in a minute if it pops up. I'm afraid if I do this. Oh, no, there it goes. Thank you, Lisa. That was very generous. At the very end of the marketplace was St. Narcisse, a Catholic chapel in a small mud-built structure. A sign once hung on the door identifying as a chapel, but it had been defaced so many times it was removed. A cross hanging over the door had been torn off several times, but the most recent replacement had thus far remained intact. The priest assigned to this chapel was Father Omar Abad, a Saudi by birth. Each day he walked through the marketplace to the chapel, stopping to buy a cup of tea and a biscuit from one of the vendors. He was always cordial to everyone he passed, but they didn't treat him the same. Nearly all of them were Muslim and despised his presence. The way he was treated was sad, but his faith was strong, and their dirty looks and lack of acceptance did not dissuade him. Every evening he would knock on the doors of the people living nearby, hoping to be invited in to share the gospel. Most never opened their doors to him, and the few that did often admonished him. He clung to the rare positive experience he would have, like the man that told him, "I admire your courage and wish you well," even though the conversation ended with him being asked not to come calling again. I think that should say not to return. There, that makes more sense. When he would pray, he would ask God to open their hearts to the word and at least make them willing to listen. The bishop that gave him this assignment told him that many of the citizens here lived through the period when being anything except a member of Islam was forbidden. Despite a solid past rooted in Christianity, it was a distant past, and recent history was full of people executed for not converting to Islam. Dressed in black with a priest's collars not only made him stand out to those he passed, but it also made him a target. Father Abad was a humble man, however, and didn't consider himself brave for representing the church. He considered himself honored. He, like many fellow priests on these remote assignments, would pray for God's protection while doing his work. Their superiors, all the way up to the Holy Father, would also pray for their safety and success. Omar was so devoted to this mission that he would... I wonder, do people know that Father Abad was so devoted to this mission that he would make the trip to St. Narcisse daily, open the door, and wait, hoping someone would visit. He made himself available daily for confession and even dressed in the proper attire to perform Mass, although no one ever attended. Each day he carried with him that cup of tea and in a bag a biscuit that he bought in the marketplace. It wasn't for him, however. It was for Ali Salad, a blind beggar that sat near the chapel every day on a mat. "Hello, my friend," Omar would say in Ali's native tongue. "A beautiful day, praise Jesus." "It is," Ali would reply, raising his dark tan face towards Omar as if he could see him with his cloudy gray eyes. "Praise be to Allah." He would then hold out his hands to receive the tea and biscuit Omar always brought him. "You seem well," Omar said to him, the only person he saw on a regular basis that would talk back to him and not slam a door in his face. That would speak to him. Omar said to him, the only person he saw on a regular basis that would speak to him and not slam a door in his face. I am, thank you, he replied. He then pointed a bony finger in the direction of St. Narcisse. Were you expecting company today? Omar looked to the right and raised a hand to shield the sunlight. There in front of the chapel's heavy wooden front door was a young boy with a stick drawing in the sand. Omar walked towards him. Omar Omar walked towards him and could see the sand he pushed around with the stick was dark and wet like mud. Hello, my child, Omar said as he approached. He didn't sneak up, but the young boy reacted as if startled. I'm sorry, Omar said. The child then pointed at the thick, stained sand that appeared to originate from inside the chapter and slowly run out from under the door. Omar bent down, placed his finger in the sand, raising it to have a look. It was red and thick. Omar quickly straightened up and looked left and right to see if anyone was watching. Only Ali appeared to notice, staring blindly in his direction. What is it? The young boy asked. Omar didn't know what it was for sure, but he suspected it was blood, and it was coming from inside the chapel. In the event this was the blood of a person seriously hurt inside, he needed to get in there and try and help them. It could also be worse. Someone could be dead in there, but in either case, he needed to get inside without drawing the attention of the locals. He especially did not want to enter with the boy there seeing what was likely carnage of some sort. Go home, boy, Omar said, gently pushing the boy aside. He unintentionally caused the youngster to stumble and fall backwards onto his rear end. In the distance, a vendor selling tobacco saw what he believed was Omar pushing the boy to the ground, and he alerted other men standing nearby. The boy wasn't hurt, but when he put his hands down to get up, they pressed into the blood-soaked sand, and when he looked at his palms, he screamed. Shh, no, Omar said, reaching for the boy's arm, but he pulled away and ran towards the marketplace. Omar panicked and quickly removed a keychain from his pocket that had only 2 keys, one to his room in the village and one to the chapter. The door, which was locked, was the only entrance into the building. He started to push the key into the lock and was startled by a loud flapping sound overhead, which caused him to drop the keys. He looked up, and on the cross above the door, a white dove had landed. He could not recall having ever seen a dove in the area before, but wondered about the symbology. Omar snapped back into reality and picked up the keys, which were covered in the sticky, blood-soaked sand, and was again startled, this time by Ali standing right next to him, holding a napkin in his hand that had been wrapped around his biscuit. Here, the beggar said, pushing the napkin into Omar's hand. How Ali, without sight, knew where Omar's hand was to give him a napkin, or that he even needed a napkin, was something Omar was not pausing to figure out. He grabbed it, wiped off the parish key, unlocked the heavy wooden door, and pushed. Meanwhile, a crowd had formed around the young boy, with one of the elders holding his wrist and staring at his bloody palms. Their gaze turned towards Omar, frantically pushing his way into the chapel. Sunlight flooded into the room, moving in a wave from the entrance up to the altar as the door swung open. The chapel had 4 rows of chairs with 8 chairs in each row split down the middle. The blood trail went all the way to the front of the chapel, up the center aisle to the altar, which was draped in a white cloth that was now stained red. Oh, okay. Hang on a second, folks. Don't go nowhere. I'll be right back. I'll be up in a minute. So I'm sorry, folks. We're having pizza for dinner, and I didn't expect it to be here for like another 40 minutes. So I saw the guy in the driveway, and he was taking it up to Holly, which he did, but I had a tip for him, so I had to run out. So I apologize. All right, let me start here, and I'll finish this. Here, the beggar said, pushing the napkin into Omar's hand. How Ali, without sight, knew where Omar's hand was to give him a napkin, or that he even needed a napkin, was something Omar was not pausing to figure out. He grabbed it, wiped off the parish key, unlocked the heavy wooden door, and pushed. Meanwhile, a crowd had formed around the young boy, with one of the elders holding his wrist and staring at his bloody palms. Their gaze turned towards Omar, frantically pushing his way into the chapel. Sunlight flooded into the room, moving in a wave from the entrance up to the altar as the door swung open. The chapel had 4 rows of chairs with 8 chairs in each row, split down the middle. The blood trail went all the way to the front of the chapel, up the center aisle to the altar, which was draped in a white cloth that was now stained red. Atop the altar was the apparent source of the blood, an 18-inch tall marble statue of Christ crucified. Omar slowly walked up the aisle, being careful not to step in or on the blood. He worried that the person responsible for this might still be in here, but the tiny might still be in there. Might still be in the chapel there. But the tiny room offered no place for them to hide or no other way to enter other than the front door. When he reached the altar, he looked closely at the statue of Christ. Blood streaks were visible from the depiction of the spikes through the hands and the feet that attached Christ to the cross, from the hole in the statue's side and from the crown of thorns. Omar's focus was on the statue, not on what was happening outside. A group of angry locals was headed his way. Let me change that to the group because we already know they're out there. The group of angry locals was headed his way, and it wasn't to get an explanation. It was to tear the building down with their bare hands if they could. They despised the chapel being there. They despised Omar being there. And they believed what they wanted to justify. And they believed what they wanted. And they believed what they wanted to justify getting rid of Saint Narcisse and Father Abad. They believed he abused a child. I don't know. That sentence doesn't work great with me. They believed he abused a child. That sounds like pedophilia. He struck the young boy. That sounds better. They believed he struck the young boy and performed some sort of sacrifice inside the chapel. Ali stepped inside the chapel and felt around for the door and pushed it shut, latching it. They will get in, he warned. I will explain what's happening. What's happening? Omar said. Naively believing it would matter. That's much better. I will explain what's happening, Omar said, naively believing it would matter. You won't with your throat slit, Ali told him ominously. Omar knew Ali was right. This group could not be reasoned with, and the police were so poorly organized, even if they were nearby, they would most likely be unable to stop them. He had one last hope, that they would enter the building and determine there was no cause for alarm. But with the statue covered in blood that ran down the altar and out of the front door, that would be unlikely. He lifted the statue and pulled off the blood-stained sheet it sat on that was covering the altar. He used it to wipe the statue clean. He then dropped the sheet onto the floor and with his foot tried to clean up the blood in the aisle. All it did was smear it around. The villagers began knocking on the door, then pounding. Omar rushed to the altar intending to hide the statue, but when he got close to it, he froze. The statue he had just wiped clean now showed signs of blood starting to stream down its surface again. It was oozing from the wounds carved into the marble. When he first entered the chapel, he suspected someone had put the blood on the statue and down the aisle to mock his mission here. But now, right before his eyes, the marble statue appeared to was bleeding on its own. For a brief moment, he felt a heavenly presence and believed this bleeding statue was a gift from God sent to this region, once historically Christian, to prove he existed. There were stained glass windows on each side of the entry door, neither of which were big enough for even a child to fit through. A pole smashed through one of them, a rock through the other, and the villagers peered into the room, trying to see what was happening. Their anger lacked justification in that they hadn't actually seen what was happening inside. Perhaps it was pent-up rage that had been building since St. Narcisse opened. The Muslim community never wanted it here, and misconstruing what they believed was the priest pushing the child to the ground and harming him was all the reason they needed to riot. Omar knew if the villagers saw the bleeding statue and got their hands on it, they would destroy it. He was also faced with the fact that there was no way to get out of here past them. He prayed they would eventually lose interest and leave, or that maybe the barely operational police would come by to restore the peace. Barely functioning police would come by to restore. Barely function. I'm going to highlight that. I don't like that either. Would come by to restore peace, not the peace, peace. While considering his options, he did not notice one man outside using his phone to snap a photo and take a brief video of the statue through the broken window. Father, please, Omar prayed out loud. If it be your will, show me the way. Omar, Ali called out. The priest turned and looked in his direction. Bring it here, he said, as he undid his robe. Ali, what are you doing? Omar asked. Bring it here, Ali ordered in a manner so charged with authority, Omar reacted. That's a great sentence. He grabbed the statue and walked towards the beggar. If this bleeding statue was some sort of a miracle, he wouldn't question how a totally blind man would know what it was and would be acting in such a guided manner. Ali's voice and actions made it seem like he could see what was happening. His gray, sunken eyes, however, indicated otherwise. Omar had no choice but to take this leap of faith. Ali wrapped the statue up inside his robe, then grabbed Omar's arm. I gotta put a few. Lead me out and walk straight towards the marketplace, Ali directed. But when I opened this door, Omar began. Listen to me, Ali said in a manner similar to a parent directing a child. Do as I say. Lead. Okay, Omar said. He then took a deep breath, grabbed Ali's arm to guide him, and unlatched the door, stepping out into the angry mass. That's what I have so far. So anyway, I have to run upstairs now. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are in a position to support this, there's the address across the bottom. Support any of the projects I'm working on. But also, there is going to be, if somebody wants to donate to this particular project, let me know. Email me at nigel@nigelbach.com, because doing so, I could give you something in return, which would be a copy of the book, which should be done in July. There's also the ability to get a personalized, handmade, hand pressed by Holly copy of the book with a chapter that's written specifically for you. But anyway, I got to run upstairs now. So I think I'll be back on